So this is a review for quiz number 3, which was chapter 3. And this covered transportation regulation and public policy to a certain extent in the book. But we'll talk more about the policy side of things in a couple weeks. The book was more related towards transportation regulation, if anything, I would say. So let's get started here. Question 1. The Interstate Commerce Commission, ICC, is usually described as, and we have some answers here, arm of Congress, kind of. That's not really a good answer though. An agency with somewhat limited powers, not true. The reason that the railroad industry was in such poor condition prior to 1980, that's not really relevant to this too much. Or an expert body providing administration that the courts and or legislature cannot fulfill. So this was, this was right here. Page 58, at the bottom of page 58. So this talks about the government and how it has 3 branches and how this independent commission was created to kind of be a hybrid power of the 3. And it was called the ICC. And the answer to our question actually is right here. Provided continuity to regulation that neither the courts nor the legislature could provide. So that is the answer right here. But this ICC was abolished in 95, I believe. Yeah, December 31st, 1995. So they replaced it with the STB, which is the Surface Transportation Board, and that really only does deal with the railroad industry. And there's also a Maritime Commission that oversees the water-based transportation. Question 2. States can unilaterally regulate. And this, if you kind of think about it, states have less power than federal, so you can kind of eliminate all these other answers here. B and D are kind of the same thing in a way. Traffic is terminating in the state, originating in the state. States can't really regulate something that's not happening in their own state, so that's a little difficult. All interstate traffic, that's just the wrong answer right there. But mostly safety is something that is kind of universal, and right here, certain safety issues that do not create an undue burden on interstate commerce. So this would be the correct answer, and this just kind of indicates that it's not going to affect the other states or what's going on outside. Why is it doing this? And that is in the book on page 61. I think I wrote down. Yeah, right here, 61. So that is right here. And it says right here, states can still regulate safety provided these regulations do not impose an undue burden on interstate commerce. So the answer is right there in that paragraph. But basically, just remember that states are, have less power. They're part of the government, so they can't override the federal laws or regulations. Question 3. Which sentence best describes the current regulation of federal control over transportation? It allows most carriers to operate freely? No. Controls all economic and safety issues? No. This is not true. C, it has removed most economic control but continues to administrate safety. That's kind of where it's at. That is really, let's see, page 61, 62, right here. This table will really illustrate how things evolved and where they're at now. And you'll see the pattern where around it's in the 70s, right around here is when they really started to um, kind of remove a lot of economic control. But safety became more and more of an issue as it went. So where's the answer here? So answer C right here makes the most sense as far as that goes, and as far as things have been going and evolving. And D, the air industry is free of all regulation, but rail, and that's another answer that really doesn't make any sense. So C is the correct answer right here. And it may not be C on your exam because they're randomized when you take the exam. Question 4. Which mode is not addressed by the National Transportation Policy? So that would be, well, it would be air. Let me find out where this is for you. This is on page 68. And that actually just contains here it is. It just contains all the stipulations and descriptions of the National Transportation Policy. So it's here. And there's different sections. Right here dictates in the railroad industry what's going on. And then over here is motor, water carriers, freight forwarders. And then the next section addresses pipeline, which is still pretty predominantly used. And we had our whole discussion on that Keystone pipeline. And it's still controversial, but it's still part of our infrastructure, so it's definitely used a lot. And so it still requires a lot of regulation to make sure everything's working properly and safe to a certain extent. And let's see. And that addresses that question, question 4. So air is not really contained in that. And pipeline wasn't listed here, but pipeline is also included. Question 5. What is the formal method used by Congress to influence national transportation? So Congress, I guess committees are part of this whole lawmaking process, but ultimately it comes down to them formulating laws and creating the committees creates the committees that create the laws. So really the only correct answer here is C, formulating the laws. And this is on page 73 in the book. I think I wrote it down, 73. Yeah, so that's all right here. Page 73, congressional committees. Talks about the Senate, House of Representatives. But basically it comes down to formulating laws. And that's kind of how it needs to be for them to really enforce things. Is it needs to be a law so that there's something formally written down, and also that you can create a penalty for violation of that law. Pretty straightforward. Question 6. Transportation planning is, and this is just a definition. It's where is it? Kind of listed in the book. 70. It's on page 75 here. Yeah. So transportation planning in the public sector, this kind of describes how planning is public activity. And this the whole this paragraph here kind of addresses that answer. We'll go back to the question so you can see it. So we have some answers here. Usually a public activity seeking to promote increased trade and reduced operating costs. That sounds logical if we were not seeing what the answer was here. Best addressed by the private sector as a recognized return on investment. Planning is really not, it's not really completely dealing with return on investment. There's also just the greater good or just public benefit in general. So, and accomplished with little regard to financial return. That's also not true either, because cost is an issue, but it's not the only issue. So B and C are not true. D, this is completely not true. The first part is the same as what we just talked about here with B and C, right? Concerned with economic gains. Not concerned with increases in congestion. That's completely not true. That's the opposite of the truth. So A is the correct answer. It's seeking to promote increased trade and reduced operating costs. So really, it's just really looking towards primarily to just right here improves the cost of living and social costs and congestion. So it's really kind of just public benefit is what it comes down to. Question 7. Which is a major controversy regarding the Federal Highway Trust Fund? So this has been something ongoing, and the Highway Trust Fund is where the revenues come from for the highway system, interstate highway system. That is right here. Here we go. So the Federal Highway Trust Fund is a financing source for the interstate highway system, and right here below is where there's controversies. And the primary one is that this fund most of it is designed for collecting money to build the interstate highway system. But the problem is most of it's been built. I think it's, yeah, here it is. 96% has been built, and they don't know if they're going to do the remaining 4%. And because that has to do with the urban areas where they may go through, if they really need them or not. That's always an issue. So for the most part, it's already been built, and so people are kind of wondering where this money is going, and it keeps being collected all the time. So the trust fund, well, I think this first answer A, whether the remaining portions of the federal highway system will ever be built, it's not really the controversy itself, but it's kind of a cause for the controversy. So that really wouldn't be the best answer here. And this is the controversy, whether the taxes should still be collected or not. So B is a good answer. C really doesn't have too much to do with that because it's talking about a road tire tax. And D, this is not really having to do with the trust fund either. So for question 7, B is the best answer, and A is part of the cause, I guess you could say, for that. Question 8, Amtrak. So this kind of goes back to the history of the railroad. It kind of was I guess, established in a usable format in the later 1800s in our country, and it was built for freight purposes. But some actually, I believe it was in England is where they first started doing it. Some entrepreneurial people realized that they could use the rail to move passengers also. So that's kind of where it started, and the freight and passenger use of the highway kind of grew at the same time, but the moving public, or sorry, moving passengers was not really profitable. So that started becoming a problem. And let's see here. Where is that? That is, where is this? Question number 8. Page 80. Okay, so page 80. Here it is. So on page 80, page 80 has some description on rail, and down here at the end is where it talks about the Amtrak system. So 1969 is, yeah, this is where it is. So it was not profitable, and it just created more problems and more debt. So in 1969, and this is in 1969 dollars, which is huge, the deficit was $500 million. But the government still realized that this service was necessary for the public, so it kind of just took it under its own wing and created Amtrak. And I believe it's still not. I haven't read about it lately, but I believe it's still not so profitable. And it's really not a good business model, but it's still in play, and it's still going. But that's kind of where it came from. It wasn't just a company that appeared because someone thought it was a great idea to make some money off of. It's really kind of a loss, kind of like the post office is right now. Still, it's still losing money, but the government knows it's necessary, so it takes care of the cushion there, the financial cushion, subsidizing everything. So that's question 8. Question 9. Domestic water carriers have benefited from major federal expenditures such as, here's the answers, and this is, on the same page. No, page 80, 81. So right at the top here, inland barge industry receives 2 major forms of federal promotion. The first is from the Army Corps of Engineers, which is responsible for river and port channel dredging and clearances, as well as lock and dam construction. So this is actually very, very expensive, stuff that has to be done all the time. And also the dam and lock construction and design is very extensive. So this is taken care of by the Army Corps of Engineers. Also the maintenance. And then the Coast Guard is responsible, of course, for defense, but they're also responsible for navigation aids and systems on the inland waterway system. So let's see here. That's the answer right here. And other answers. Subsidies used to locate production plants close to rivers. That's not really true. If things were located close to rivers, it's kind of because they wanted to access the waterway for transportation, or for energy sometimes. A lot of times you could generate electricity from the water flow. So B is not correct. C, research that led to more efficient tugboats. No. D, subsidizing water carrier expenses on the Mississippi River. No, that's also not true. So A was the correct answer here. Question 10. The Maritime Administration, MARAD, was created to pay subsidies to U.S. flag carriers who are having difficulty competing against foreign carriers. This is not true. Assist ship lines and builders wanting federal aid. No. This is it's kind of similar to that, but what it does was it paid the difference between the cost of domestic ship production versus overseas ship production. So it kept the production here, and that was actually important so that the military ships could still be built by these companies, because the companies that built the ships build both military and private. And actually, that's in the book. Right here. So that's kind of what I just talked about is all listed right here. And right here you can see it, the survival of the U.S. shipyard is also viewed as essential to U.S. military capability. And what were the other answers? Be certain that there would be employment for U.S. sailors? No. Prevent the economic decline of U.S. flagged ocean carriers. That's the correct answer, and that is given right here, where it states that freight or passengers originating or terminating in 2 U.S. points can only be transported in ships constructed in the United States and owned and managed by U.S. citizens. Some of you who have to take, I think it's international business, might be, I forgot, 37, no. Well, international marketing, sorry. International marketing probably will deal with this, or 418, the management class, because that has to do with a lot of this stuff here. So, freight or passengers originating or terminating in 2 U.S. points can only be transported by U.S. ships. This is kind of like I guess kind of like a union situation here, where they're protecting everything. Also, it stipulates, here it is, it also stipulates that 50%, at least 50% of gross tonnage of certain U.S. government-owned and sponsored cargoes must be carried by U.S. flag ships. So it's kind of just dictating that certain situations have to be handled by U.S. ships, and that kind of protects the U.S. flagged carriers. And that's the answer right here, D. Prevent the economic decline of U.S. flagged ocean carriers. Otherwise, a lot of these other countries that have lower costs, or lower dollar operation costs, will just come here and just steal all the business. So it's kind of just protecting the interest of the U.S. shipping industry. Last question, 11. What agency was created to secure the United States from terrorist activity and attacks? So this was after September 11th. So FBI was already in place. Coast Guard was already in place. Navy SEALs is just a division of the Navy. That's already been in place. Department of Homeland Security. So that is new. And that was kind of created to address that. And that takes care of quiz number 3, chapter 3.